When you hear the word Amish, a very specific, almost romantic image likely comes to mind. A horse and buggy clattering down a quiet country road. A man with a distinctive straw hat and a long beard, but pointedly, no mustache. A woman in a simple bonnet and a long, plain dress, perhaps hanging laundry on a line against a backdrop of rolling farmland. They are the plain people, a community seemingly frozen in time, a living museum of a simpler, pre-industrial America, embodying values of hard work, family, and faith. But in the last 20 years, thanks largely to the explosion of reality television shows like Breaking Amish, Amish Mafia, and a dozen others, a second, far more sensational and often contradictory image has forced its way into our collective imagination. This is the image of Rumspringa. We're shown a period of wild, teenage rebellion. Amish teens ditching their bonnets for bikinis, swapping their buggies for muscle cars. We see them getting tattoos, drinking heavily at chaotic parties, experimenting with drugs, and living a life of seemingly total freedom before they make the big choice about whether to join the church or leave forever. And then, we're often shown the dark, dramatic flip side of that choice. We're told stories of shunning, or midang, as they call it. The cold, hard, and seemingly absolute excommunication of anyone who dares to leave the community after joining the church, a social death sentence. Where even your own parents will allegedly no longer speak to you or even eat at the same table with you. So which image is the truth? Are the Amish a peaceful, idyllic community embodying simple faith and family values? Or are they a high-control, rigid, almost cult-like group that uses a bizarre rite of passage involving teenage parting, followed by a lifetime of psychological enforcement through the threat of total abandonment? The reality, as is often the case, is far more complex, more nuanced, and more sociologically fascinating than any reality TV show could ever capture. The truth about Rumspringa and shunning is not really about parting or cruelty. It's about a concept the Amish hold more sacred than almost any other, the ordning, or the unwritten order that holds their entire world together. Today, we're going to separate the sensational television myth from the deep theological and sociological reality of Amish life. To truly understand the Amish, the first and most crucial misconception we must discard is the idea that they are people simply stuck in the 1700s. This is fundamentally wrong. The Amish are not ignorant of modern technology, nor are they inherently afraid of it. Rather, they are a highly intentional community that consciously and carefully curates technology based on one primary question: will this technology strengthen our community and our separation from the world? Or will it weaken it? They don't reject cars because they are inherently evil, but because the mobility offered by a car would fundamentally destroy their model of a close-knit, interdependent, walkable community. A car allows you to live 20 miles from your neighbor, commute to a job in a city far from home, and easily access the temptations and values of the outside English world. The horse and buggy enforces proximity and reliance on each other. Similarly, they don't connect to the public power grid, not because electricity itself is sinful. Many Amish use batteries or generators for specific tasks, but because the physical power line represents a direct connection to the outside world. It brings in radio, television, the internet, the very influences they believe corrupt the soul and erode community bonds. Their entire way of life, from their plain dress to their use of horse-drawn plows, is a meticulously designed fence built over centuries to keep the community in and the values of the individualistic, materialistic outside world out. This profound emphasis on separation is their very origin story. The Amish were born from a schism within the Swiss Anabaptist movement in 1693. Their founder, Jacob Ammon, was a bishop who felt his fellow Anabaptists, a group that already practiced separation from the state, were becoming too liberal, too lax in their discipline, too accommodating to the surrounding culture. He demanded a stricter, more disciplined, and more visibly separated life. And his central, non-negotiable demand, the issue that ultimately split the movement, was a strict enforcement of meeting shunning. Ammon believed, based on his literal reading of scriptures like 1 Corinthians 5, that a true Christian could not, and should not, even share a meal with a baptized member of the faith who had fallen into unrepentant sin or left the church. This practice, considered too harsh by many other Anabaptists, became the defining mark of the Amish. From their very beginning, they have been a people defined by their strict community boundaries and their commitment to group discipline. Their ultimate spiritual goal is Gelassenheit, a rich German word that is difficult to translate but encompasses submission, yielding, humility, and letting go of self-will in favor of the will of God, as expressed through the community and the ordnung. And paradoxically, to get an individual to willingly choose a lifetime commitment to Gelassenheit and submission to the group, the Amish system recognizes that you first have to allow them, for a specific period, the freedom not to submit. That, in its essence, is the real purpose and function of Rumspringa. Let's deconstruct the TV myth piece by piece. The word Rumspringa is a Pennsylvania Dutch term that literally translates to running around. It is not a formal, church-sanctioned ritual or a mandatory period of wild partying. It is simply a sociological term for Amish adolescents. It's the period that begins around age 16, when an Amish young person is considered mature enough to start socializing with the opposite sex in group settings. And it typically ends when that person makes the decision to get baptized into the Amish church, which usually happens when they decide they want to get married, often in their late teens or early 20s, typically 18 to 22. The single most important theological fact that reality TV conveniently ignores or downplays is this: baptism in the Amish faith is a voluntary, adult choice. You cannot be born Amish in a religious sense. You are raised in an Amish culture, but you only become a member of the Amish church through adult baptism after making a conscious, public confession of faith and a vow to uphold the community's rules. Because an Amish teenager during Rumspringa is not yet a baptized member of the church, they are not technically under the full authority of the ordning unwritten, orally transmitted set of rules and expectations that governs every detail of community life, from the width of a hat brim to the color of a buggy. This creates the loophole that Rumspringa operates within. You cannot be formally punished or shunned by the church for breaking rules you have not yet formally promised before God and the community to obey. So, what really happens during Rumspringa for the vast majority of Amish youth? Scholarly estimates suggest that for 85 to 90%, or perhaps even higher in some communities of Amish young people, Rumspringa is remarkably tame. Their running around consists primarily of attending large youth group singings on Sunday nights, a major social event, playing group sports like volleyball, and beginning the process of courtship, often in a horse-drawn courting buggy. It is, by modern English standards, incredibly innocent and community-focused. It's simply Amish dating and socializing. However, there is a smaller minority of Amish teens, often referred to as the fast set or rebel Rumspringa, who do experiment more significantly with the English world. They might pool their money with friends to buy a cheap car, hiding it off the farm. They might trade their plain clothes for jeans and a t-shirt when they go into town. They might go to a movie theater, listen to rock music, or, yes, attend parties and experiment with alcohol or smoking. Why does the notoriously strict Amish community tolerate this behavior, even tacitly? Not because they approve of it, but for two profound sociological reasons that are crucial for the long-term survival of their culture. First, it acts as a social safety valve. It allows for a period of natural youthful questioning, boundary testing, and even rebellion to occur in a way that doesn't immediately threaten the entire social structure. It contains the rebellion within a specific time frame. Second, and this is the underlying genius of the system, it makes the eventual adult baptism a truly informed, binding, and therefore more stable choice. The Amish elders understand, perhaps better than many other religious groups, that a faith that is merely inherited or forced upon someone is brittle and likely to break under pressure. A faith that is consciously chosen, especially after seeing the alternatives, is far more likely to endure. When a 21-year-old Amish person stands before the congregation to be baptized, they cannot later claim, "I never had a choice." I didn't know any different. They did have a choice. They had the Rumspringa years. They saw, at least from a distance or perhaps through limited experimentation, what the English world had to offer: the cars, the phones, the individual freedom, the different values. And they are now formally, publicly choosing to reject that world in favor of Gelassenheit, submission to the Ordnung, and lifelong commitment to the Amish community. The wild parties and dramatic exits you see on Breaking Amish represent a tiny, highly sensationalized fraction of the Rumspringa experience. But the underlying sociological function of Rumspringa is absolutely real and essential. It serves as the crucial gateway that ensures the long-term viability of the Amish faith by filtering out those individuals who ultimately cannot or will not submit to the demands of community life, while simultaneously solidifying the commitment of the vast majority who, after running around, decide that the Amish way is where they truly belong. But what happens when you make that solemn vow at baptism, and then, later in life, you change your mind? This brings us to shunning or meeting. If Rumspringa represents the relatively open door into full membership in the Amish church, meeting is the heavily reinforced, locked door preventing baptized members from leaving without facing severe consequences. When an Amish person is baptized as an adult, they make a lifelong vow before God and the assembled community to obey the Ordnung and remain faithful to the church. This is considered the most sacred and binding promise of their life. To break this vow either through persistent and repentant violation of the Ordnung, like buying a car after baptism, or, more drastically, by deciding to leave the Amish faith and community entirely, is viewed not just as a personal choice, but as a profound spiritual betrayal. It's seen as breaking a covenant with God, rejecting your family and heritage, and endangering the spiritual health of the entire community. And this is when the original, foundational belief of Jacob Ammon, the very reason for the Amish split in 1693, kicks in with full force. If a baptized member openly and repeatedly defies the Ordnung and refuses the counsel of the church leaders, or if they formally join another church or simply cease to live as Amish, the church congregation will hold a members' meeting. After attempts at reconciliation fail, they will vote, often unanimously, to excommunicate that individual. And with formal excommunication comes the strict practice of meeting, or shunning. What does this actually look like in practice? It's often misunderstood, sometimes exaggerated by former members, but undeniably harsh. It is not, typically, a complete silent treatment where no one will ever speak to the shunned person again. Family ties run incredibly deep, and basic human interaction usually continues, albeit strained. The rules of shunning, based on the Amish interpretation of scriptures like 1 Corinthians 5:11, with such a one do not even eat, Romans 16:17, and to Thessalonians 3:14, are specific, symbolic, and designed to enforce a clear social and spiritual quarantine. The primary and most famous rule involves the table. A shunned person cannot eat at the same table as baptized members of the church. If a shunned son visits his parents' house for dinner, his mother will likely still serve him food, but she will serve him at a separate, small table in the corner, or perhaps after the main family meal is finished. He is physically present in the home, but symbolically excluded from the fellowship of the community table. This is a constant, quiet, and psychologically devastating reminder of his broken status. Other rules reinforce this separation in daily life. Church members typically cannot accept a ride from the shunned person in their car if they have one, run a business in partnership with the shunned person, exchange gifts with them, though aid in a true emergency might be acceptable. engage in casual social visiting. They generally treat the shunned person with a cold, formal distance, avoiding unnecessary interaction. The goal is to make the separation painfully clear. To an outsider, and especially to the person being shunned, this practice looks unthinkably cruel, even barbaric. How could a loving mother refuse to eat with her own child? How can a community founded on religious principles enact such profound social rejection? But to understand the Amish perspective, we must grasp their theological justification. They do not see meeting as an act of hate or punishment for punishment's sake. They see it, paradoxically, as an act of tough love motivated by two core beliefs. First, it is seen as necessary to protect the purity of the flock. Shunning acts as a clear, terrifying deterrent to all other baptized members. It demonstrates the absolute seriousness of the baptismal vow and the stark consequences of breaking it. It keeps the fence strong against worldly influences. Second, and perhaps most importantly to them, they truly believe meeting is the only way to potentially save the shunned person's eternal soul. The ultimate goal of shunning is not to drive the person away forever. The goal is restoration. They hope that the loneliness, the social isolation, and the spiritual emptiness the shunned person experiences in the world will become so painful that they will eventually come to their senses, realize their error, repent, confess their sin to the church, and return to the community. For the Amish, the temporary earthly pain of being shunned is considered a small, necessary price to pay if it leads to the eternal salvation of that person's soul. It is, in their deeply held conviction, the most loving, albeit severe, thing they can do for someone who has broken their covenant with God. So, the Amish world operates on a stunning, carefully constructed paradox. It is a voluntary society that emphasizes the absolute necessity of adult choice for membership, using the relative freedom of Rumspringa as the mechanism to ensure that choice is informed and binding. But once that voluntary choice is made at baptism, the individual becomes subject to the collective authority of the ordning. Enforced by one of the most powerful tools of social control ever devised by human community, the threat of complete and total social and spiritual rejection. Through meeting, it is a system brilliantly designed for its own preservation. And judging by the remarkably high retention rates that 85 to 90% who choose to be baptized and the steady growth of the Amish population, it is incredibly successful. This brings us to the great debate, the question that forces us to examine our own values about community, freedom, and faith. Is the Amish way of life an admirable model of Gelassenheit? A beautiful, intentional community, a fortress of faith, family, and mutual support that has successfully resisted the fragmentation, materialism, and hyper-individualism of the modern world. Is it a living testament to the power of community over the self? Or is it a rigid, closed, and high-control system? One that uses a carefully managed period of limited freedom during Rumspringa primarily as an indoctrination tool, and then wields the powerful psychological weapon of shunning. To make leaving, for those who later change their minds, an almost unbearable experience, effectively trapping them. Does it prioritize the survival of the group at the expense of the individual's autonomy and well-being? Is this a beautiful community of faith-preserving precious values, or is it a system that ultimately values conformity and obedience above personal freedom and conscience? Let me know your thoughts, respectfully, in the comments below. What do you admire and what troubles you about the Amish approach to community and choice? If you found this deep dive into the complex reality of the plain people fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that uncovers the real stories behind our beliefs and practices. Thanks for watching.